Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the channel. So what did we learn, or what did I learn, right? Let me speak for myself. What did I learn, the conclusion of this particular season, right? I know we're knee deep in recruiting right now. I know we're knee deep in transfer portal, but I know I said I wanted to do a video about this because I wanted to have a little bit more time to kind of think so I can be a little bit more objective and non-biased in some of my particular takes. So these are a few things that I learned at the conclusion of this year. For starters, you can have the highest paid coaching staff in America. That does not equate to wins, right? It seemed to me throughout the year, it seemed like we had some continuity issues, a lot of communication issues. It seemed that some particular coaches necessarily didn't want to take blame for some of the things that transpired on the field. Some coaches did take, blame for some of the things that transpired on the field. But at the end of the day, both players and coaches have to wear this record. We went 5-7. We're a 5-7 football team, right? But looking at it from the vantage point that we're at now, we come in, we went 7 wins last year, even though as many people want to, try to poke holes in that 7 wins. The holes that you can poke in this 7 wins to say, hey, we could have lost 2 more games. I can turn right back around and say, hey, well, we could have won 9 last year. I mean, when I say last year, I'm talking about Manny's last year. So, I mean, that conversation can go on and on and on. I mean, we could make a case that Manny Diaz probably could have won 10+ games in 2020 as well as in 2021. I mean, the cards didn't go that particular way, but we have to stick to what happened, right? We won 7 games last year, so there's no need to try to diminish it and say, okay, we could have won. We really should have won only 5 or 4. So let's not do that, right? But high-dollar coaching staff does not equate to wins. It just doesn't. Second thing I learned, that the shelf life of a running back, right? Or maybe let me rephrase that. Running back depth is a very important thing. It's very important. In spring, we knew Don Chaney was coming off of an ACL. We knew Rooster had a procedure himself, trying to come back. But if you tell me that in the spring we were having a room of Citizen, Chaney, Rooster, Parrish, Stanley, as well as Thad Franklin, that's 6 guys. And we would say, hey, hey, we're in the money. But going into the season, we had 3. And then when the season concluded, we really had 2 because Thad Franklin walked away. I don't know what was going on with Lucius Stanley. Henry Parrish was nicked up. Obviously, Don Chaney and Citizen, they had their injuries. So at the end of the year, we went from 6 backs down to 2. And I can say the same thing about the offensive line as well. But running back depth is a very, very important thing. And seeing that running backs have a very short shelf life in a lot of regards. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because if my memory serves me correctly, and if I'm wrong, just let me know in the comments. But it seems that the NFL rewards the backs who are the bell cows and then punish the guys who kind of operate in this particular system where their body is somewhat preserved. It seems like you would want to reward the guy with the less tread on the tires, but it seems like the NFL is rewarding the guy with the most tread on the tires by drafting them a lot earlier and stuff like that. So, and the guys' name that come to mind are like Najee, Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry. Just thinking of some, just a couple of the guys, Leonard Fournette, just some of those guys just coming off like the NFL's rewarding the guy who's the bell cow, when the reality is, shouldn't you want the guy with the less tread on the tires? But I guess maybe that could be from a money, from a money standpoint, that kind of helps with that, that shelf life type of deal. But, in any particular regard, right? Third thing I learned, it's imperative. It's very, very imperative to have a number one wide receiver. Well, a number one receiver, right? I don't want to necessarily put this on the wide receiver. If your tight end is your number one receiving threat, I don't think that's an issue either, right? You do want that guy that you can line up on the outside, but if you got a versatile tight end, you can line him up on the outside as well, right? We saw the latest incarnation of that was Kyle Pitts at, Florida and things like that. So it's imperative that you have a number one pass catcher, right? And for the most part of the particular season, we did not have that, right? We did not have that. I think the last couple of years, I know some of the moderators have on 247 board have talked about how we didn't really necessarily have a receiver step forward, and if we did have a guy step forward, he wasn't one of those guys that necessarily would be, your quintessential number one receiver or number one, just pass catching threat. So I think it's imperative going into next year that we find out who that guy is, whether that guy is a tight end, whether that be Jaleel Skinner or Arroyo, or if it's a receiving threat, and I can only go by what's on the roster now, whether that's Kobe Young, whether that's Jacoby George. So, and those just are some of the guys that I just think about. But it's imperative that we do get a receiving threat, right there. The next thing that I learned, and I saw someone say this, man, and I thought about it, and I said, the left tackle, because most quarterbacks are right-handed, they get a lot of the praise, right? A lot of the praise for being the guy that's there. But I was looking at someone comment, and they said, man, kind of, at least in his opinion, that the interior can be just as important, because from an outside standpoint, you can help the left or right tackle. You can bring a tight end over there to help. You can bring a back in there to chip, which you can bring a back end and the tight end to maybe help on the interior as well. But in most instances, you're bringing that back and that tight end out to help with that pass rush off the edge. And so, but the guard and center play for us needs to be something that has to improve, right? Obviously, we dealt with some injuries, and a lot of people I know we're talking about just from the strength standpoint, but I mean, strength with no technique is irrelevant. You can have a guy that's strong against a guy that's weak, and if the guy that's weak has better technique, he's gonna win. So obviously what you want is a guy that's strong and a guy that has technique. And saw a couple of glimpses of Inez Cooper this particular year do some things that really were good at the guard position. Really think that Jalen Rivers can maybe take his game to another level as well. So it'll be good that moving forward that I realized that our guard play wasn't where it it really needed to be. I know we look at a lot of the blitzes from off the edge and wondering what happened, whether the quarterback didn't slide protection or guys just had miscommunications or whatever. But our guard and center play, it needs to step up. Obviously, the tackle play, that's what it is. But I do think we do need to solidify the interior of our offensive line moving forward. So maybe we can address that issue within the portal and bring in some competition. Maybe to help some guys that are already here, excuse me, step up, or those guys just end up becoming starters, right? But we do need to address that particular issue. And before I continue on, some of the things that were just obviously apparent, like I'm not necessarily going to discuss it. Like I know linebacker play and stuff like that, like that's just apparent. But I'm just talking about some of the other things that were not just apparent, just as apparent, to me. But I mean, they were apparent to me, but they're not just necessarily things that we already don't know. I'm just talking about some observation of some other things that I think that we need to do. And lastly, our quarterback play needs to improve, right? I've stood on the table for TVD and Ja'Carri. I haven't necessarily stood on the table for Jake, just because some of the things I feel like that it just you couldn't stand on the table for some of the stuff, right? He did some things well, but I do think just overall the quarterback play has to improve, whether that's bringing in the transfer or whether that's the guys taking it upon themselves to actually get better. I know I have not been as friendly to Josh Gattis in terms of his particular system and things like that, and I still feel that particular way. I don't feel like the system actually promotes top tier quarterback play, because I got 3 years of evidence, well actually 4 years of evidence now. I have 4 years of evidence to support that particular claim. But I do think in whatever it is that they are being asked to do, I do think the quarterbacks can be better within that particular aspect. But I think that, and when I say better, I'm speaking about when I was just talking about those blitzes off the edge, right? It's kind of like watching Coach Hayes' football breakdown. It's like, hey, look, the right side, I'm a right-hand quarterback. I gotta protect myself from that. I can see that over there. I need to make sure my backside is clean. And so, in quite a few instances, it seemed to be where the guys were more concerned about sliding the protection to the side that they can already see and leaving the backside kind of open, because that's a play that TVD got hit on. That's the play he got hurt on, where a guy, just a free runner, just comes right off the edge and hits him in the back. And pre-snap, we saw no protection to slide to one side. So while people are necessarily talking about Rhett Lashlee's offense being one read and being simple and stuff like that, I'll go back and forth with you all day about that. I will, because it makes no sense. But where I can maybe agree with you on a particular aspect of this term dumbing down is that regardless of what particular system that you're in, you need to make sure that your quarterback understands where the pressure is coming from, especially if it's in a situation where he does not have a hot route necessarily, where you don't have an outlet pass, which many parts of this particular season, it didn't seem that we had, an outlet in many aspects. So it's very important that, moving forward, our quarterback play gets better with understanding pre-snap what the defense is trying to do. And maybe that could be a factor or function of maybe Rhett Lashlee's offense. But at the same time, the only quarterback that we really saw come in and try to set protections and stuff like that was Ja'Carri. So could we say Ja'Carri was the only quarterback that was paying attention in film study about protections or what the situation is there? But the reality is that we need better quarterback play from a setting protection standpoint, right? You gotta, in many aspects, you do have to make sure that you're protecting yourself, right? But those are just a few things that that I took away from this past season, aside from just the absolute obvious type of things. But hopefully a lot of these issues are rectified going into next year, and we can just build. And again, we can look back on this 5-7 season as being rock bottom and being a catalyst of where us as a team and where this program does not want to be moving forward. So as always, man, it's always about the you. Like, share, subscribe, comment, and I'm out.